Say, dirtbag. This is Kid Shriner, the voice of the Green Arrow, and you are listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast.
The original Justice League has become a memory.
I am resigning from the Justice League.
What's going to happen to the League now?
We rebuild. From the ashes of that great conflict, a new team has arisen. A much, much bigger team.
Each of you brings something different to the table.
Old friends, new heroes. And as usual, plenty of bad guys jumping up to get beat down.
Calm down, and I'll let you go.
How about you kiss my ass?
Watch out, evildoers. There's nowhere to run. Because this year, they're all around you. The League is unlimited. An all-new original series, starring every superhero worth cheering for. And then some. Justice League Unlimited.
Where am I exactly?
Among friends.
There's strength in numbers.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 204 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter page. It's Liam. Liam, we are, after last week's wacky April Fool's episode, where we spent the entire week talking about something completely alien to us in another completely different comic book universe, we are back safe and sound right where we belong in the DC animated universe, and it couldn't be a better episode to return to this universe with. Welcome to episode 204 of the DCAU Review.
That's right, and not only are we back in DCAU, but we are jumping into Justice League Unlimited for the first time in quite a while. I don't think I had realized how long it had been since we had done at least a full month of JLU reviews. So excited to jump back in today with a very, very memorable one in Task Force X.
It's nice to be back here, and we are continuing in, of course, the Cadmus story arc. And this is, of course, maybe quite possibly the most popular storyline in the history of the DCAU. So it's awesome to pick right up with this one. And of course, with the ever popular Suicide Squad and its seemingly endless incarnations that we've gotten over the last decade or so, whether it be in animated form or in, of course, live action, it's nice to revisit the DCAU version of that, or maybe not the Suicide Squad, but Task Force X. But before we get into discussing this week's episode, Liam, we will, of course, have our official IMDb synopsis brought to you by the Pod Tower. That's right. You can hear our entire catalog, all of our bonus episodes and our standard episodes available at youtube.com/thepodtower. And not only if you go over there and subscribe to us, it supports us. It also helps out our friends at the Watchtower database and Tim Talk, who both put out some great content with regards to the DCAU and other stuff as well. So go like that page. Liam, this episode originally debuted on the Cartoon Network back on May the 21st, 2005, meaning we are coming up here in just a few short weeks here on the 17-year anniversary of this episode's debut.
Absolutely, and this is the synopsis for Task Force X, which was written by, what a team, Dwayne McDuffie and Darwyn Cooke, directed by Joaquim de Santos, with music by all three of the Dynamic Music Partners, and animation by DR Movie Co. And that synopsis reads as such. Cadmus has recruited a team of supervillains named Task Force X, based on the comic Suicide Squad, made up of Deadshot, Plastique, Captain Boomerang, and the Clock King. Their mission? Steal the Annihilator armor from the Watchtower.
It's fine.
It's a little wordy,
yeah,
but it gets the job done for the most part. So
that's right. So we kick off our plot here. Now, before we get into it, we will just say it seems for at least for the censors and standards and practices sake, despite the fact that they were a little bit more lenient here in the later years of the DCAU, they decided to go with the name Task Force X because this is still a TVY7 production here in the US. So we weren't going to use the word Suicide Squad in the name. So they did go with that alternative name for it. But we kick things off, and it's pretty eerie. Speaking of a children's cartoon, nothing more children oriented than a man being led to what appears to be a gas chamber of death. The
faithful return of the DCAU's preferred method of corporal punishment.
There you go. No hooded executioner this time, though. That's a bit of a disappointment. But yes, as we come to learn here that it is in fact Deadshot himself that is being led to the slaughter, so to speak. And as he gets to his room, he of course is being very sarcastic and is sort of just he's ready to go to accept his fate. We'll just say it that way. However, when they get into the room where he's about to face his execution, and what did you know it? There's already somebody, quote, sitting in his own seat, unquote. And we learn that this is, of course, one Colonel Flagg sitting there. And without even introducing himself, without a word, they're just handed some papers. And immediately they turn to the officer that has Deadshot in cuffs and immediately order him to be released despite protests.
There's still time, Mr. Lawton. Are you sure you don't want me to pray for you?
I'm sure. But if it comforts you, Padre, by all means. Huh. My chair's already taken. Guess we'll have to come back tomorrow.
Who are you? What is this? You can't just come in here. Release the prisoner. But release him!
What if I don't want to go with him?
Then you can go and take your seat, tough guy.
Yeah, it feels like Deadshot thinks he's getting off scot-free, and this is no strings attached. But Floyd Lawton here is riding in the car, and is at this point that we kind of get the idea that this is some sort of, well, I won't steal your line, Liam.
Well, really, it's the hottest meme of 2016's line more than mine. But yes, it does in fact appear Flagg is recruiting Deadshot for some sort of Suicide Squad.
Yes. And at this point, Colonel Flagg reminds Mr. Lawton that he just had a delicious last meal, and despite maybe the asparagus being overcooked, that Lawton did in fact ingest all of it. And he lets him know that there are, of course, Liam, our favorite, the return of nanites. It was a nanite-laced meal with explosive nanites, not just regular nanites. These are exploding nanites. So this is their sort of injection that threatens, and Colonel Flagg uses this to make sure that the Deadshot doesn't try any funny business and to escape. So it's at this point he kind of gets the buy-in from him and takes him to this warehouse where we learn just who the other members are of Task Force X.
Floyd Lawton, aka Deadshot. Meet Task Force X. George Harkness, aka Captain Boomerang, expert thief and inventor. Temple Fugit, the Clock King. Planner, tactician, expert with locks and systems infiltration. And Betty Sen Souci, current alias Plastique, explosives expert.
I know. I've seen the pictures.
And that's all you're gonna see, killer.
Enough of this now. Let's get stuck into the business at hand, eh?
Agreed. Time is of the essence.
That's right. We have Plastique, which introduced to as sort of a femme fatale explosives expert. We have Captain Boomerang, of course, the classic Flash rogue. And then also in this crew, along with, of course, Flag and Deadshot, we also are introduced to a familiar face, that being Temple Fugit, aka the Clock King, returning here. And he's sort of going to be the guy in the chair while the squad goes on their mission. A Task Force X, because they don't really ever call them the squad. So the task force is tasked with a very, very tough mission, and that is, in fact, they are going to be sneaking on the Justice League Watchtower to pick up a specific weapon or package. They're not even quite told what it is they're getting. And it seems like a tall task, and not sort of the various members of the task force are sort of trying to protest and say that this is crazy and there's no way that they could possibly complete this mission. But Clock King sort of has a plan where he's been able to study the league, the Watchtower's roster, and sort of who is where and who is coming and going and who is on duty. And so they found sort of the perfect time to strike, as there's only really 3 main leaguers they have to worry about, those being Captain Atom, Green Lantern, and the Martian Manhunter himself, who's always in that tower. He never goes anywhere. So that sort of creates an interesting dilemma for them, as they seemingly Flag and the Clock King are pretty well prepared, but the rest of the task force is pretty unsure, and that continues on even once they sneak into I guess a cornfield somewhere, where they knock out and sort of take the place of some of the various the purple shirts, I guess you'd call them, of the Watchtower. They're not the red shirts from Star Trek, but the crewmen, the expendable crewmen of the Watchtower, and the squad sort of takes their place, and they are teleported up into the Watchtower, and the mission is on from there.
That's right. So we learn, and I will say that initial sneaking aboard the Watchtower really goes off without a hitch. They're easily kind of in, and there is sort of some, of course, magic technology that allows Colonel Flag, who's wearing these glasses initially, to sort of disrupt the security system, which allows them to board the Watchtower without much fanfare. They even invoke, potentially because the security system goes down as they're being scanned in, they invoke the name of Martian Manhunter at that point, or the Martian, to strike some fear into the security guard as having to explain why they're behind schedule. So this allows them to be snuck through at this point.
Yeah, it's awe-inspiring, but I got a schedule to keep here. For the love of... Second time this week this hunk of junk's gone out. You'll have to wait till tech support gets here.
Look, we gotta get a move on. We're late.
Tough break, pal. You know the drill.
No sweat here, as long as you're the one who explains it to Jean.
I thought he was going to wet himself when you mentioned the Martian.
And at this point, they sort of split up, and we have Captain Boomerang going with Colonel Flag, and then we have Deadshot and Plastique on their own, as they're all being sort of, as you mentioned, with the Clock King or Temple Fugit in the chair, sort of giving them direction. So they send Plastique and Deadshot down to the reactor room as a distraction, so that they're able to break. So the colonel and the colonel and the captain. That's a spin-off waiting to happen right there. The colonel and the captain can go on their own mission, which is yet to be revealed. Once the colonel and the captain arrive at this hallway where they believe that they're going to break in, they gain access, but they are encountered by a second door that they were not in the schematics that they originally had. So this throws them off a little bit. And because of this, they have Plastique and Deadshot begin the reactor meltdown ahead of schedule. So Plastique sets up some bombs, and Deadshot is dealing with one of the expendable crewmen, discovers them, and there's a bit of a fisticuffs that happens. And they time it perfectly so that when Plastique's explosives go off, an exploding boomerang is able to knock down this second door that they were unaware of. I didn't manage to mention it, but as Plastique and Deadshot are on their way down to the reactor room, there is this funny interaction between them, and Green Lantern actually gets on the elevator, of course, oblivious to who these two people are on the elevator. And just to twist the knife and be a jerk, Deadshot asks him about potentially getting Hawkgirl's autograph.
Hey. How you doing? Excuse me, Mr. Lantern. For 6 weeks now, my wife's been after me for Hawkgirl's autograph. You wouldn't know where she's at today, would you?
Haven't seen her.
Okay. Thanks anyway.
You are a very bad boy.
Tell me you didn't love it.
Which John is none too pleased with this request and sort of brushes him off in quite an annoyed fashion. But as he leaves, Plastique, who quite flirtatiously has been talking with Deadshot the entire time, calls him quite the bad boy. So after the fisticuffs and the explosion, and the captain and the colonel are able to break down this door, we discover that the whole plot was to get into what amounts to the Justice League's trophy room / armory, as we see a bunch of different cameoed weapons and relics from different encounters between the Justice League and certain villains, which we can talk about in visuals. But ultimately, we learn that their main goal and their main purpose for breaking in is to retrieve the Annihilator, that the Annihilator was the end goal for this team to retrieve for unknown purposes at this time. But their job is to get the Annihilator off of the Watchtower and back safely to Earth. So it's at this point that there's Colonel Flagg recites the chant to try and awaken it, and then seems to remember that it is fueled by rage, and catches Captain Boomerang off guard and gives him a swift right to the jaw, which awakens the Annihilator, and it comes alive just in time for some of the Justice League to encounter them as Deadshot and Plastique have reunited. Meanwhile, of course, the Watchtower is in full panic mode at this point, and evacuation mode. Jean is trying to get the entire crew off of the Watchtower. Captain Atom has been sent down to the reactor room to try and contain the leak, and Green Lantern is attempting to assist with the evacuation. So it appears at this point that the Task Force X may escape quicker and without a fight, as it were. And their distractions look like they've been working at this point, but they happen to come across a couple of the C and D list leaguers in a hallway that leads to a pretty fun little bit.
Yeah, that sort of race against time is, and we're kind of, I think, talking about it as we go here, but this whole thing really does take on like sort of a classic heist, spy story, and telling it mostly from the point of view of the villains, at least for the most of this second act of the story here, especially. And so then it does begin to switch back as the Plastique and Deadshot are sort of running to try to avoid being shut down on the lower levels as they're sort of dropping these giant metal doors to try to contain the radiation leak. And right when it looks like they're going to be trapped, Captain Atom, sort of unbeknownst to who they are, is there to save the day. And then, yes, they sort of are able to reunite with Flagg and Boomerang, as you mentioned, and we actually get a little bit of a showdown, a Justice League versus Task Force X showdown. Maybe not the Justice Leaguers that one would think of when you say Justice League versus Suicide Squad or Justice League versus Task Force X. Mm-hmm. But yes, we do get Vigilante, Atom Smasher, and the Shining Knight going up against the squad here. And it's a pretty fun sequence. We'll certainly talk more about it in vehicles, where they're pretty evenly matched. Atom Smasher is sort of paired off, of course, with the Annihilator, and is trying to fight this sort of unstoppable monster, and that sort of frees the rest of the squad to deal with Vigilante and Shining Knight. And they really just barely get away from Shining Knight by locking him in like a closet, which I think is a pretty fun bit there. And then Vigilante and Deadshot have sort of a classic gunslinger standoff, which I think is great too. And then Flag is able to knock the Vigilante out just as the Annihilator knocks the Atom Smasher through a wall, and they sort of arrive back in the main hangar, and they seem prepared to make their escape when who should show up but, of course, the Martian Manhunter himself to take them all down. And he's doing a pretty good job of it until, of course, once again, the Annihilator gets involved and tears him right in half. literally tears him in half, which, of course, with a character like Martian Manhunter who can shapeshift and change, you can do that sort of super violent stuff to him, because, of course, then he'll just regenerate. And it seems as though Jean is doing all right in the fight. Honestly, once he pulls himself together, so to speak, he is able to knock the Annihilator down, and it looks like the squad might be in trouble. But actually, based on a conversation, it's sort of the Chekhov's scenario that we are asked about earlier in the episode, where Plastique is asked by the Clock King and Flag what would happen while she's on the mission, if Superman walked in, and she said she would grab a hostage. And in this case, the hostage happens to be the giant Atom Smasher, and she threatens to drop an explosive into his mouth if Jean does not back off. And she decides to set it on a timer and tries to drop it in his mouth anyway. But of course, Captain Atom returns and is able to sort of struggle with her. In the process, the explosive gets thrown into the air, and we see how Deadshot earns his name as he fires a perfect shot right through it, sets off a giant explosion in the hangar, and that sort of covers the getaway as Flag, Deadshot, Boomerang, and the Annihilator all escape the Watchtower.
Back off, Freak Show, or the meat puppet eats me.
Come here. Let's go, girl.
I've set this for 30 seconds. Plenty of time for you to disarm. Or not, as the case may be.
Not very ladylike behavior, ma'am.
Plastique!
C'est la vie.
Tend to her. They thought of everything.
That's right. Yeah. And as Jean tries to do a recall and bring them back, the teleportation machine explodes in front of him. So there's a short in it that they somehow installed. So Jean bemoans that they thought of everything at that moment. So there's Plastique was the one that was left behind and potentially killed her. I mean, there was some groaning that happened after the explosion.
There's some groaning and twitching, yeah.
But the way that her body was sort of sitting there was a little brutal. So who knows? Mm-hmm. But she is left behind, and then we do get the reveal, of course, at the end, once Task Force X, or the remaining members of Task Force X, have arrived back at the warehouse, which, by the way, there was plenty of Luthor Corp, LexCorp and mm-hmm. Luthor material there in the warehouse. But as we get there, of course, we will see that the true head of Cadmus arrives at that point, and this is all the work of Cadmus, as we see Amanda Waller arrive as well with Tala, who is there and admiring the Annihilator. and there's some speculation from the task force as to whether or not it was worth it and whether or not this machine can truly help them. Amanda Waller questions that, but Tala reassures her that this is something that can definitely be used in what their goal is. So we're left to wonder just what is to come next for the Annihilator and where it might rear its ugly head. And then we sort of get a little bit of a bow on the rest of Task Force X as they're walking out, and Colonel Flagg is questioned by Deadshot as to what Amanda Waller has on him to make him potentially do something so underhanded, and he says she doesn't have anything on me. Some of us don't have to be blackmailed to serve our country. So we learn that the motivation truly is this idea that the government does not trust the Justice League at all. And Colonel Flagg looks at this as just another mission for him to do. And as Deadshot appears to be ready to sneak away, he quickly is reminded by Colonel Flagg that this is a 5-year tour of duty and that he's not quite off the hook yet, and that he can plan on signing up for more missions in the upcoming years. So that's kind of where we leave the task force for the time being. And then, of course, we get to flash back up to the Watchtower as we have this interaction between Jean and John Stewart.
How did you know Vance was the inside man?
He was the only one on the tower whose mind I couldn't read. Cadmus must have supplied him with a sophisticated method of masking his thoughts.
So, what do we do with him now?
I'd like to go in there and wipe clean the last 2 years of his memory.
Whoa, that's a little harsh, don't you think?
He's a liability.
I'm sure he's already spilled everything he knows to Cadmus.
Don't you understand? We can't trust him.
Jean, we can't trust anyone now.
Jean may be the most angry that he truly appears in this entire.
There is.
He's real angry. They have discovered just who the person is, and it's a young man by the name of Vance, who has actually a connection to the larger DCAU, perhaps, which is interesting. Gotta love the work of the writers of this episode to bring some long-term continuity Easter eggs, some retroactive continuity Easter eggs into it. But so Mr. Vance is responsible for that, and Jean has discovered him because he was the only one whose mind on the entire Watchtower that he could not read. And John asks Jean what he thinks that they should do, and Jean, in anger, says that he feels like he should wipe Vance's last 2 years from his memory. And John sort of pulls the reins a little bit on Jean and says, well, that seems a bit extreme. He's probably told everybody, told all of Cadmus what he knows anyway. And Jean comes back and says, well, at this point, we can't trust him. And John, at that point, recognizes that it's not just Vance that they can't trust if there's been this infiltration, that they have such a large staff on the Watchtower that at this point, they can't trust anyone. And that's kind of the ominous ending of our story here.
Yeah, it's a really, really, I think, compelling ending. And I don't think anything is like super overt. Obviously, this was written and created, during the Bush administration. There's a lot of talk, and that talk did not cease when that administration ended. But
right.
But yeah, those sort of themes, I think, were very much fresh in the minds of, I'm sure, certainly of Dwayne McDuffie, who again was I believe it's one of those episodes where it's credited by Mr. McDuffie and teleplay by Darwyn Cooke. So I'm sure they both worked on that together. But those sort of themes of, when is it, what can you excuse because it's the quote unquote good guys doing it, and what sort of terrible things are you willing to do in the name of purity? And again, you have that on one side, you have the Cadmus representing the literal U.S. government in this case, double crossing and lying and potentially being willing to kill various superheroes or even other innocent people on the Watchtower in defend themselves from the Justice League, who they believe could be a threat. And on the other side, you have Jean being very much willing to, or very much at least considering going there and willing to sort of torture this guy who he believes has double crossed them. And so it is really, really fascinating to see those themes again explored, even in sort of a surface level in this 22-minute children's cartoon. And it's a really, really compelling way to leave it, where you have this sort of a contrast of Flag and sort of his, ultra patriotism, his willingness to sort of follow any order, no matter what it is, so long as he believes he is serving his country. And at the same time, again, you have the Justice League sort of considering what exactly they need to do and to protect themselves from this sort of outside force, who at this point they're still pretty unsure of what it even is.
But in this case, I think it's done in a way that is enjoyable, and certainly is not done in a preachy way. That certainly doesn't feel like it's done in a preachy way, and it's done in a way that's written so well that that's makes you want to see how the story is going to turn out, which is why these episodes are some of the best that have ever been written.
Absolutely. I think it's, like I said, it introduces a lot of interesting themes. And again, it takes those themes, but it doesn't hit you over the head with them. And in the middle of it all, you also have, like we said, this sort of very fun and interesting sort of race against the clock. It's, for both sides of this, for the task force who are trying to pull off this heist and get out before the League even really knows they're there. And then the League who's lurking to evacuate the Watchtower and free and deal with this reactor leak. And you have Captain Atom letting Jean know that whatever this was, it wasn't any kind of accident. So you have Jean sort of being immediately suspicious. And it's a fun bit of the heist going off, and it kind of goes wrong, but then they pull it off anyway, and you have the good guys kind of left stroking their chins, wondering what exactly they should do next and who they can trust. So yeah, it's a great next chapter in this whole overarching Cadmus story.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that for the episode itself, there are a few good action beats. I think the battle, obviously, in the actual hallway there between the task force and Vigilante and Shining Knight and Atom Smasher is sort of not bookended. It's right up against then the very next battle that Jean has with them. And so yeah, it's kind of light on the action, at least at the beginning. It's more tension building. It's more, as you said, like thriller, spy, heist type building of the story there in those first little parts there, and building up the tension. But I think ultimately the action really comes in pretty large at the end there and makes it an interesting story. And then the reaction that Jean has, which seems very, very uncharacteristic of him in response to this feeling of betrayal, I think also gives another dimension to his character. And certainly I like that that Green Lantern being always being the cooler head in the room, despite being a soldier. He's not a hot-headed soldier. We've seen him do that with Hawkgirl before and Flash and several others, but he gets to use that skill on Jean for this episode and kind of calm him down there at the end. But so overall, I think this is a very fun episode, despite not having a ton of action till the final, kind of like the tail end of the second act and the majority of the third act. I think that it paces well, and for all those reasons, because it's really enjoyable. I love that they went with the perspective of the villains and you follow them for the most part of it. I read, and I think in one of the featurettes they talked about that on one of the DVDs, this episode was kind of stalled and didn't seem to fit right until they decided to rewrite it from the perspective of the villains. And I think that was obviously a brilliant choice on their part. So for all those reasons, and because of the strong story and the fun had, I gave it an 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just a tick higher. I went 9 out of 10. I think it's a really, really strong story. And like I said, it pushes the ball down the court, so to speak, and to the next chapter of the Cadmus stuff. But it also, I think, just in a bubble, even without that overarching story, is still just a fun episode. And You get some, as we said, some returning villains with Deadshot, and a very cool throwback with Clock King as well showing up. So yeah, you got some really fun stuff there, and I think it creates a recipe for a really strong episode.
Agreed. All right, moving on to our second category here, Liam. It's going to be animation and visuals. What stood out for you this week? As we mentioned, or as I mentioned, there's not a ton of action in the first, I would say, 2/3 of the episode, but more than makes up for it in the final part of the episode. But you have some unique places that they visit, some new character models here of characters out of costumes, and a sort of a revamped version of the Clock King. So what stood out for you in visual and animation?
Yeah, my first thought is that Deadshot looks like Tony Stark, or at least 90s like first season of the cartoon Tony Stark before his glorious mullet was born. But yeah, I like seeing him out of the costume because he really does have that model, and they do try to push that, as you mentioned, with sort of the flirtatious relationship with him and Plastique, but they really kind of pushed him as the bad boy. And I think I mean, for the reasons of the mission they're on, it wouldn't make sense for him to be in costume, but also, as you mentioned, that sequence where he's sort of badgering Green Lantern about getting Hawkgirl's autograph and things like that. You just get the impression that this guy's a real sleazeball. And I think that, so I liked seeing him out of costume. Again, seeing Clock King back. He doesn't have the clock glasses anymore, which I was a little disappointed in.
Yeah, that was disappointing.
I guess those aren't government approved now that he's quote unquote legit on this stuff. But yeah, it's cool to see the Clock King back. And yeah, I think maybe my first sequence before we get to the heavy action beats, where once they make it into that first elevator past the opening security and all that, and they sort of get to work of suiting up, so to speak, and Plastique pulls up her uniform and pulls off like a fake midriff, like a fake layer of skin around her stomach. Then reveals she has all these plastic explosives, and then you see Captain Boomerang lift up his sleeves, and he has all these collapsible boomerangs in his these sort of little pockets on his wrists. And then you see Deadshot opening up a lunchbox with a bunch of energy bars in them, and peeling apart and realizing that he's sort of building a gun out of all the different pieces. And I think that sequence is really fun as they sort of gear up for the heist before the heist even actually starts.
Yeah, there's plenty of fun in that as they're coming together there. And I think even as they rip off the costumes and the name tags, well, the name tags specifically, as they sort of lay out the original crew that was supposed to be brought up to the Watchtower itself, I thought that was great. I do love as they're going through, and as I mentioned, the aforementioned interaction between GL and Deadshot and Plastique in the elevator. They both have this really shocked, terrified look on their face as they pan around. But his sly look as he realizes that he's going to sort of twist the knife is just hilarious. It's like this quick change in the way that they made his face look, and it's just the slightest thing, but it's pretty fun. But yeah, I think let's see what else. Oh, when they go into the trophy room or in the armory, there's some great stuff in there as well. I think I
have a list here if you
go through it.
So we have a Gorilla City hover bike, as well as Grodd's mind control helmet from the Brave and the Bold parts 1 and 2. We have a Weather Wizard's wand. Try saying that 3 times fast. From presumably from Hereafter Part 1, or perhaps even going back to Speed Demons. We see parts of the giant robot from Legends Part 1, as well as one of Lex's battle suits on display. We also see part of Toyman's giant robot from Hereafter Part 1, and then plenty of Thanagarian weapon, the axes and shields and various things there. And then we also see the ultimate Deus Ex Machina weapon from A Better World Part 2, as we are introduced, or we do see Lex Luthor's power disruptor as well.
There you go. I mean, that was very important at the time for stopping the Justice Lords. So now now it's in the Justice League's own hands, though.
I maybe would have taken that if I were the task force. That apparently works really well.
Yeah, you would think that Lex would have told them, "Hey, I built this thing, and they have it in their possession. It just completely disrupts all of their powers." Yeah, that was an interesting choice to go that route, but that was fun.
Swapped that Phantom Zone projector that they put Doomsday in the other day.
Now we're talking. Yeah, a giant robot. I don't know that was the way to go. Clearly, it wasn't, because ultimately we know that it doesn't work out in their favor. But sure, it seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess. Yeah, other than that, I think that the fight between the Atom Smasher and the Annihilator is a ton of fun, because you have two gigantic behemoths fighting each other. It's kind of one of the very few times that we get to see the Atom Smasher in action. So he sort of moves slower because of his size, and but the two of them clashing and having this big battle, and him swooping in to save, I think it's Shining Knight from being crushed by the Annihilator's foot. He kind of swoops in at the last second and grabs the foot of the Annihilator and hurls him across the hallway there. I liked that battle. That was a lot of fun. I like that Deadshot ends up getting Vigilante's revolvers. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't remember that being a plot point, but he initially has these ceramic guns that he's firing, and in order to get through security, and then in the battle he's able to procure the Vigilante's revolvers. I thought that was great. And then I think the final fight between Jean and Task Force X is it's just a great showcase of Jean's powers. Of course, we get Jean turning into what appears to be sort of a pseudo Martian dragon thing again, and sort of squeezing Plastique into unconsciousness. Then he does phase through without killing, but phases through Deadshot, I believe, to knock him out.
He basically does that Scorpion's fate, the original Mortal Kombat fatality, where
right, exactly, yes,
reaches inside and puts his hand through the guy's chest.
Dead, yeah, should be dead, but not. I do also, he kind of pulls a Batman. He first sneaks up behind somebody and and sort of gets them from behind and prevents them from trying to do the no look punch, and then as he's about to take care at the very end of the remaining members of the task force, that of course is when the Annihilator, as you mentioned, picks him up and tears him into pieces. So that was a pretty scary visual. John just literally being ripped in half, complete with the sound effect that came with it. It was a little brutal. And then he's thrown into like two different parts of the computer, and there's an explosion, and then he actually has to reform, which I thought was actually another pretty neat visual that was done there. But I think the episode for the same reason that I told you that I liked the plot, because it was a little bit lighter on the action. There's a little bit less actual fun to be had outside of those two fights. I will say that the fights in the hallway, there's a lot of fists that are thrown, a lot of punches that are thrown. So there is a lot of action there and a lot of violence compared to what we've probably seen in the last several weeks on cartoons. But it's kind of light on the action otherwise, because there's so much story that's being told, and it's not a bad thing. It's not, I don't think it's a detriment to the episode. It's just there was more story to be told and conversation, and the build up of them heisting the Annihilator robot. So for all those reasons, I ended up giving visuals and animation a 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just a tick higher again. I went 8 out of 10. I think it's really, really strong. Again, the heavy action is more in those last minutes or so, but I just think it's so fun that the whole again, Joaquin Dos Santos is the director, and I feel like I noticed with his directing of these JLU episodes, there's always just one or two things where there's a little extra oomph put into it. And the thing that stuck out to me is when Shining Knight and Vigilante have sort of paired off to try to fight off the rest of the task force, while Atom Smasher and the Annihilator are fighting. There's a spot where Rick Flag like runs up the window and then does like a flying kick to the Shining Knight to knock him off balance, and then does like a running flipping drop kick to him and knock him into like the closet or whatever that Plastique locks him in. And it's just like these extra little like anticipatory movements as he runs up and jumps off the wall and then does this like really graceful spinning kick. I was like, this is really, really tremendous stuff. And then as you mentioned, the battle between Jean and the Annihilator as Jean sort of swirls and slithers back together, and he sort of reforms out of this puddle, and we see the Annihilator sort of turn and see that he's reconstituting and sort of run at him, and you get a shot of like the Annihilator's feet and then a shot of its hand, and the hand makes a fist and it goes, and meanwhile Jean has his, and then as you said, kind of in another spot here, he gets to pull off sort of the Batman trick where he's not looking, and then all of a sudden he turns around and you get like a POV shot of the Annihilator looking down at John as John turns around and just hauls off and punches him and knocks him back. So I thought that all of that last few minutes of the episode, and even the shot there as the explosive sort of gets thrown into the air, and Deadshot gets his little one-liner in there as he fires the gun through the explosive, and you get sort of almost like a slow motion for a moment there as you see the bullet go through and the hole sort of generate in the explosive before it goes off. Just really tremendous. And then even just sort of the scowl on Jean's face as there's as the machine sort of breaks down when he tries to recall the teleporter, and he has the scowl on his face, and you get the fire city is sort of reflecting on him, and you get these shadows on his face as he's sort of frowning and says they thought of everything. So just really again, there's little extra flourishes that always seem to come in episodes that Joaquin dos Santos directed, and DR Movie Co, of course, responsible for the animation itself. So yeah, strong score from both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I will mention is I mentioned in the actual story itself, but so at the very end, of course, they reveal that it's one of the crewmen, this Vance, this Robert Vance, that was in charge of it, or I think they just call him Vance. I don't know if they actually list his full name, but so that, of course, there is a character later on well, not later on, but prior to this in Batman Beyond, there was a character by the name of Robert Vance, who was the one that ultimately in the episode Lost Soul ends up taking over the Batman Beyond suit. And it's the episode most famously, you can hear it in the archives at DCAUreview.com if you like to. We've covered it already. But this, I guess, is purported to be the father of the grandson in that episode, so that he fits in between the grandfather, who is the computer program, and the son, who is the surviving person in that episode. So that's some great continuity. Whether or not, I don't know if it's ever been confirmed exactly, or whether that's strictly fan theory, but it fits, and we know that the late great Dwayne McDuffie loved including continuity just for continuity's sake. So why the heck not?
Yeah, and I think if you put that character model next to the grandson that we meet in Batman Beyond, they're pretty similar as far as like the hair and the sort of the eternal frown on his face throughout the episode, because you do see him in one of the earlier scenes sort of talking with Jean about I think when the reactor leak first goes off. So I think it's definitely there's some smoke to that fire for sure.
Agreed. Yeah, but pretty awesome. Another one of the many reasons why we love these shows. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. As you mentioned, Dynamic Music Partners responsible for this week's soundtrack. So I had a few different things actually that stood out this week, which I will say, I don't think we've ever said that the music for Justice League Unlimited, or Justice League for that matter, is bad. I don't think we've ever had high critique of it, but a lot of times I know that one of the things that we've mentioned is that it was meant to sort of just blend in the background. It's usually synthesizers that are mimicking orchestral instruments at times, and so sometimes it can blend in, not blend in by standing out, so it just sits in the background there, and it's just more or less meant to set the mood with an occasional flourish here or there. But I really thought that they did a really great job of setting this soundtrack apart and starting with the introduction, when Flag is going through the introduction of the entire task force, we get this theme that comes in and is played under his introduction of them, and then it sort of veers off into this very jazzy, classic, seductress type style theme once he gets to Plastique, and there's this flirtation that's happening between her and Deadshot, and it really played up that scene. And I thought, I was like, man, the Suicide Squad, the original one, not the Suicide Squad, the sequel, could have really taken some notes here from how they did the intros here with this, not only with the storytelling, but with the music just being very subtle in the background there. But I thought that was great, and that stood out to me. Did you have anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. Sort of the introductory scene there, because I think it goes back and forth. Because I think in those action beats, you certainly do have more traditional Justice League Unlimited fight music, especially once you get to the portion with Jean. But once they get up to the Watchtower, and especially once, as we said, they sort of do that sequence where they're revealing their weapons, you get music that is, again, very reminiscent of like a Mission Impossible or something, where you sort of start out with the percussion, and it's just like really sort of going on with like the conga drums, and then it sort of builds to the strings sort of start coming in very high, and then you get like a horn brought in as well there to sort of when sort of the crescendo hits there, and it's really, really well done, and really adds again to that sequence of them sort of sneaking around and doing their spy stuff, and then once the mission starts to go wrong and everything, I think that really added that feeling of, again, like you just said, like we're watching a mini spy movie here. And so I think when we're with the squad, we sort of get this very tailored theme for them, and sort of motif for the music in almost every scene. And then sort of once we transition back to the Justice League towards the end of the episode, then we get maybe more of the traditional music that you would expect from a JLU episode. So I think a good job of sort of switching the musical identity even within a single episode, but it totally makes sense because of the type of story you're telling and from whose point of view you're telling it.
Yeah, I agree. The only other musical note that I took was, I think there's a scene, as I said, where they've split up between Deadshot and Plastique and then Flag and Captain Boomerang, and they're sort of debating at that point because they've lost their bumper as far as time is concerned, that Flag and Boomerang are debating on whether or not they should leave Deadshot and Plastique behind. So at this point, Flag realizes that he's going to go with what Boomerang suggests and leave them behind, and just as they do decide to do that, that's when, of course, Deadshot and Plastique almost comedically run right past them, arriving just in time. And there's this musical number that plays underneath of that I thought it was pretty great.
You're at 2 minutes past zero. You've used up your pad. There is no longer any margin for error.
All right, you win. We go on without them. Bridge, double time.
The evacuation's going too slowly. The radiation will be here before the tower's cleared.
We need you to use your ring to transport large groups to the Watchtower annexes.
But I think it's a solid performance on music. I love that there were a couple pieces that did stand out, and as you mentioned, adding to the general idea that this is a thrilling spy or caper or whatever you want to call it, a heist movie, whatever it is, and adding the right soundtrack to that really pulls off that atmosphere. So I ended up giving music a pretty strong 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point higher again. I went with an 8 out of 10. So yeah, I think I just really loved the sort of the switch back and forth again from sort of whoever's point of view, and yeah, I think that sequence where they're sort of pulling off the heist is just really, really outstanding, and is definitely something I, again, didn't really remember specifically for this episode until I went back to it, and just thought that was such a neat way to incorporate that. And again, not really relying as heavily as you mentioned on the synthesizers or the electric guitars and things that you might expect from Justice League Unlimited, which generally used a lot more of that style of music. So yeah, a good change of pace and a good reason to have that change of pace as well, because of sort of the specialized story they were telling.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Liam, let's bring it home here with our final category of the day, which is going to be voice acting. Not a huge cast here, but we do have some characters playing more than one character. Characters we're used to hearing play other characters, play other characters. It's a huge mess, but I think it's a pretty fun voice cast to cover this week. So let's talk about this week's voice cast.
Absolutely. We'll rapid fire through a few. We do have Chris Cox as Captain Atom and the Shining Knight. This is the replacement Captain Atom. I know we weren't a fan of the original, but here we have the new Captain Atom voice actor here, and he does a fine job in that limited role. And elsewhere in our task force, we do have returning from Batman the Animated Series, Alan, might butcher this, Rachins or Rashins. I'm not sure how you would say that, but the returning voice of Clock King. And it's one of those things where I did look it up, because when I heard him speak, I was like, well, that's either the Clock King, a really good sound alike. And yeah, it is in fact the same actor there. So again, he doesn't have a ton to do in this episode. Like we said, sort of the guy in the chair, sort of giving a little bit of advice and letting and sort of helping the Boomerang to time his explosives to Plastique's explosives. So, but very cool to have that character back, and to have the original voice actor back as well. We do briefly have CCH Pounder returning as Amanda Waller here, as again we sort of see at the end of the episode that it's that's sort of all connected to this overarching Cadmus story arc.
You really think we can do something with this?
An invulnerable juggernaut forged by the gods? Oh yes, Miss Waller. Most definitely.
I heard we lost Plastique.
Yes, ma'am. You'll have my full report by 0800.
Right, that'll be all. Rick. You're a good soldier. Your father would be proud.
Ma'am.
But as far as our squad themselves, we do have Donald Gibson as Captain Boomerang. This is actually his final role as an actor. But he does this, and then of course one more episode later on in JLU. Yeah, I like him. Again, I would perhaps leave it up to our friend Nathan from Superman the Animated Podcast to judge his propensity for the Australian accent here, but it seems like a pretty authentic, Captain Boomerang stepping right out of the comics into this animated world here.
Yeah, it seems somewhere between like Crocodile Dundee and the Crocodile Hunter, I guess. I don't know. Like,
there you go.
He didn't quite, there's no weird dingoes and crikey or any of the cliched sayings from that we as Americans would assign to somebody from Australia. But yeah, I think he certainly does a fine job. I chuckled when they're talking about as after they've gotten through security, and Plastique gestures over to him and says, I can't believe, or she almost lost it when this guy set off the metal detectors, and he goes, well, 75 cents is 75 cents.
He couldn't let us through fast enough.
That was nothing. I almost lost it when this bonehead set off the metal detector.
75 cents is 75 cents. I'm supposed to throw away money?
Shut your mouths and get your mind on the job.
Speaking of Plastique, we do have Juliette Landau, who folks might know from a recurring role on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as well as some other voice work, but she actually plays both Plastique and Tala. And it's interesting because I did not realize that was the same actress, for one. And second, I feel like in the first scene, she sounds just like she's just kind of doing like the sultry femme fatale voice. And then when she's setting the explosive, like she has a Southern accent? Like, am I going crazy here?
No, I'm not sure.
Or did she have it the whole time and I just didn't pick up on it in the first scene?
Yeah, I think it was just maybe more subtle in the first scene. I don't know. I honestly didn't pick up on that, but yeah, it could have just been a change in the way that she decided to deliver some of the lines, or to have a thicker accent in the second part, or the second half of the episode. So no, I didn't pick up on that myself, but yeah, we'll blame it on maybe the first couple of scenes she didn't have as many words that come out all Southern like, I guess. I don't know.
That's fair, yeah, but of course she is bouncing off of usually we would save this guy for the main cast, but we have Michael Rosenbaum guest starring in his own show, as he's not playing the Flash, but he is doing his best retroactively uncomfortable Kevin Spacey impression here, as he of course voiced Deadshot previously in The Enemy Below, as well as I think one other episode, and here he is again. And if other than that uncomfortable that we know it's a Kevin Spacey impression, that's not his fault, right? Especially because this was recorded in 2004 or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting again hearing him sort of be the sleazy guy. He doesn't really ever get out of that sort of really laissez-faire sort of quiet, sarcastic rasp to his voice, but he does again have some fun moments, both in interacting with Juliette Landau as Plastique, and with as you mentioned, sort of couldn't resist sort of twisting the knife into Green Lantern with the Hawk Girl comments.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of good one-liners, and as you said, he's constantly flirting and being flirtatious with Plastique. Quite a few double entendres, at least in early dialogue with her as well. So yeah, he's unsurprisingly very good, even if it's a little bit of an uncomfortable impersonation that he's doing for the voice. But that aside, that doesn't take anything away from the actual performance. And even though it's Michael Rosenbaum, and that is slightly distracting, as we've said, some of those voices, it's different enough from the Flash where it was okay. By the time the episode ends, it's a big bowl of okay after that. You're okay with it. It blends in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will say, before we get to our main leaguers, we do have one more voice to talk about, which I think is really the standout for me. And that is Adam Baldwin, who folks would probably know from Full Metal Jacket most famously, but playing Rick Flag here. And normally, Cal, when I would say, if I referred to someone as like monotone, that would be an insult. But I think he really nailed it because of who this Rick Flag character is shown to be in this episode. He's just such this single-minded, the ultimate soldier, going into battle. So from that first scene where he's sort of instructing Deadshot about the nanite laced meal that he ate, and how he's gonna, if he tries to run away, he'll look funny running with no head. And then, he's sort of introducing the plan and sort of barking orders throughout the episode at all of them, and all the way through to the end there when he has that brief interaction with Waller, and she, his father would be proud of him. And then, Deadshot tries to walk away, and he reminds him that he's still on the hook for another 5 years. Like, I think fantastic here, and it's because he just plays it. He's so straight and so serious the whole time. There's not really any kind of crack in the armor, other than maybe when he first runs across the Shining Knight and Vigilante. I think he does get kind of one sort of half smile and one liner out of him at that point. But other than that, he's just this really single-minded, unstoppable soldier, and we see that as this real like physical force, as they kind of again tee that up earlier in the episode when Captain Boomerang says, "Oh, this one don't need no weapons," and then we see him in action, and we just see this sort of ferocity that he has. I think he just knocked it out of the park as Rick Flag here.
Yeah, he's really, really good. He is the soldier that is obeying orders, as you mentioned, and is doing so for the love of his country and doing what he believes right, and has to hold these supervillains in check. But at no time does it feel like he's intimidated by the fact that these people have killed multiple humans, more than likely, and that they're super criminals and that they were on death row at one point. So yeah, I think that balance of being able to be a soldier, a quiet force for what he's doing, but also there's certainly some hint of humor as he's certainly willing to joke and sort of taunt and tease Deadshot about eating the nanites. Then, of course, as he's sort of prodding the security guard about not having to get Jean involved, that's another moment for him. And then even after he slips the right hand to Captain Boomerang, reminding him that that there's the Annihilator runs on rage, comedy there too. But yeah, it's great. And then that final line that he delivers, where he really believes not only that that Amanda Waller doesn't have anything on him, that he believes that he's doing the right thing and he's doing what he's doing for the love of his country, is certainly delivered in a very sincere manner. So I think that he does a really great job.
Most fun I've had since my last root canal. Well, gang, guess I'll be seeing.
Dream on, dirtbag. 5 years. You sign up for missions like this for 5 years. If you survive, then you go free. You don't like it, there's a nice warm seat waiting for you back at Bell Rev Correctional.
Tell me, Colonel, what's Waller got on you?
Not a thing. Some of us don't have to be blackmailed into serving their country.
Agree, and then we just have our two original Justice Leaguers to mention. Of course, Chris Cox also voiced Shining Knight, and Michael Rosenbaum also briefly gave a voice to the Vigilante there. But our main Justice Leaguers, we of course have Phil Lamar as Green Lantern and Carl Lumbly as Martian Manhunter. And like we said, neither one of them, because it's so focused on the villains, neither one of them has a lot to do. But I do, as we've already sort of talked about in our plot section, but that final beat there where they're discussing, what should be done about this traitor in their midst and everything, and Jean just sounds so angry and paranoid, and Green Lantern is sort of trying to be the voice of reason to them. I think even though it's brief, I think that's really a really fantastic exchange that those two actors have.
Yeah, it's great, and Jean really gets and Mr. Lumbly really gets to show off his range in this one. He's not just a simply cold, calm, and collected as we sort of are used to him, but he gets to really show some of the dynamic emotion that he gets to show off, certainly more than usual, I'll say that, as he gets to instruct and certainly help evacuate the Watchtower. But then again, that final scene is he's clearly quite angry and upset. Mr. Lumbly's performance really does a great job of standing out, because we're not used to hearing that type of emotion come out of this character. But Mr. Lumbly didn't miss a beat. It's a great performance, and just the way that he delivers it clearly emotes that this is a different feeling than we're used to for this character. And the fact that they're interacting together, and Phil Lamar delivering that final line is, well, we actually can't trust anyone now. It's like, ooh, that's so good. And the way that it just sort of hangs out there, the deliberate way that he delivers the line is great. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to see those two characters who don't always have a chance to interact, it seems, but man, what a pair of amazing legends they're working together and turning in some great performances.
Absolutely. And I also think Carl Lumbly's little bit of dialogue when the squad first sort of makes it into the main hangar as they're trying to get away, and he sort of floats down out of the sky and asks them, is being in here with me what you truly want? And he has the glowing eyes, and he just becomes it becomes like he's the final boss to before you think the level's over, but here comes this this unstoppable boss. And you almost do see him represented in the first part of that fight as a monster, as the villain of this piece, or the antagonist of this piece, because we've been so focused on the task force characters. So yeah, really, really interesting to see him kind of get to stretch his legs, especially in sort of even though he doesn't have a ton of scenes to do it in.
Agreed. Yeah. So for all those reasons, I ended up, I think there's some pretty strong performances this week. And this may be the strongest, well, by score, it is the strongest category of the week for me, but I ended up giving voice acting a 9 out of 10. What about you?
Love that. Yeah. And one more time, I was just 1 point higher. So I ended up giving it a perfect score of 10 out of 10.
There we go. Love that. Yeah. Some great performances all the way around here from the entire cast, and a lot asked on some of these guys that aren't used to maybe leading an entire episode other than Michael Rosenbaum. So yes, no beats were skipped there. And CCH Pounder as Amanda Waller, albeit brief, a fine performance from her as well. And so you do really get some great performances even from the supporting cast as well. So love that. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our final scores, believe it or not, for this week, and totaling everything up, I end up with a very respectable 31 out of 40 for this week. What about you?
And I am not quite a few, but a few points higher here. I ended up at a final score of a 35 out of 40.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, I think we were just 1 point apart in each category, but I was 1 point higher in each one. So yeah, I think as we can jump towards rewatchability here. I think this is a pretty easy 2 thumbs up for me. I think on one hand, it's just a good episode. It has some characters that are either returning in people like Deadshot, and then also a character like Captain Boomerang, who will appear again later on. It's a great episode as well, just like we said, even in a bubble, even if you're not that familiar with the Cadmus story arc, I think you could just watch this one by itself and it would still be interesting and enjoyable too. And then as part of on the other hand, as part of the overarching Cadmus story arc, it's it's another piece of that puzzle of this sort of deepening paranoia and mistrust between the US government and the Justice League. So it's a huge part of the ongoing story, and I think it checks boxes as far as just being a really fun episode of television to watch as well.
Agreed. Yeah, I think this is definitely part of the Cadmus story arc, as we've already mentioned. It's a fun 22 minutes. It's definitely a different style than we're used to, than what the rest of the DCAU kind of puts out there. So you have this classic caper heist storyline that we're used to, that make up so many famous movies, but you adapt it to a 22-minute story and it works out really well. And there's certainly some tension and some excitement, and whether or not they're going to be able to complete this mission and what's happening with the Justice League. You almost find yourself rooting against the Justice League, which just tells you how great the writing is. So yeah, it's really, really good. I think this is a 2 thumbs up for me as well.
Awesome.
All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, we would love to hear your thoughts on this week's episode as well. We know that these episodes of Justice League Unlimited are some of the most popular. They've been the most listened to when we've covered the Cadmus story arc before. So we'd love to hear your feedback. Tweet us at DCAU Review. Give us a follow there. Liam runs our Twitter page. We get the opportunity to interact with you. That's always a blast. You can also, of course, comment on our our Instagram, not Facebook. Well, we have a Facebook, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that or Bruno for that matter. We don't talk about either of those things. But the Instagram at DCAU Review as well. You can certainly comment there and let us know. There's also a spot each week, if you listen on Spotify, exclusive to Spotify, there's a question that we usually ask each week. So you can certainly give us your thoughts that way. You can also respond to our poll we put up each week through the Spotify app if you are a Spotify listener as well. So benefits for those that listen to us through Spotify, which not only can you listen to us through Spotify, but you can listen to us through Apple Podcasts, where if you're on there, we would appreciate a 5-star review. Or if you're on Spotify, you can also leave a 5-star review for us. We would greatly appreciate that. Helps us in algorithms and let people know that when they give us a try, that they're hopefully going to be listening to something good. You can support the podcast not only by subscribing or following us on social media. You can head over to DCAUreview.com and head to our shop, pick up a piece of merch. There's also a link at the bottom of every podcast that you can click on if you'd like to support us directly. And then last but not least, the aforementioned Podtower YouTube channel. If you go over there, subscribe, like our videos when we post them, that's a free way to support us and one that we appreciate greatly. Liam, we are moving forward here and continuing in a month of Justice League Unlimited episodes. Let's talk about which one we'll be covering next week.
That is right, Cal, and we will be going forward with another episode of JLU next week. And this is not only a pretty hotly requested, multiple times we have been asked about when we were going to review in our JLU reviews, but I think this is one that's a pretty big personal favorite of you as well.
That is right, Liam. Double Date is one of my favorite Justice League Unlimited episodes of all time. Maybe the episode that I've watched the most of this Justice League Unlimited run. Haven't watched it in a little bit here, and certainly not with a critical eye. So excited to see if it holds up under the extreme scrutiny that we put these episodes under. But it's sure to be a fun one next week. Can't wait.
Absolutely. It's going to be just a really fun time. Of course, that episode written by great Gail Simone, so a lot of fun stuff to get into with that one next week.
It'll be a blast. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.